Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here for part 2 of my new Crochet 101 series that I'm putting together. And so if you haven't seen part 1, I'll make sure that I link to that below as well as to the whole playlist. So just so you know, I'm going back and reshooting at least the first 3 videos for several reasons. And so what I'm doing here is breaking down the very basics for those who are totally new to crochet. You've never done it before, or you haven't done it in a very long time and you need to run through some of these basics again, and also showing you how you can read patterns, or at least understanding some of the abbreviations that you come across, because once you know how to read patterns, it's going to make it a lot easier to be able to do the various things that you like to do and not have to be stuck in a rut doing the same thing all the time. So today I'm going to be covering the single crochets, and I want to talk about some of the various things that you can do once you have your chain stitch down, which is your first thing that you learn. Then you move on to the single crochet, and there's actually a lot you can do with just that stitch alone. And here's another afghan that I've made before. I never got a picture of it, which really bums me out, but this one is done entirely in single crochets, and also what's called like a long single crochet, which I will cover. The nice thing about doing afghans and different things like that in the single crochet is that it makes for a nice tight stitch and a much warmer blanket or sweater if that's what you're looking at. So this particular pattern starts off right here. It says with A, and what that means is the color. So you'll have like basically a key, and it's going to break down the colors. Like up here it will say MC is for the cream color, A is for brown, B is for tan, and C is for red. So that way they don't have to list that each time, and that way too, if you decide to do completely different colors, well then you can just still follow the labels and know which color you're going by. So this afghan is going to start off with the brown according to this. So with A, where'd that go? Chain 219. So 219 chains. So that's the CH. And then it says fasten off, because instead of working back into that chain, you're going to keep starting a new row. That's how you get these fringes. So this one, you start a new row every single time. So whenever you see fasten off, that means you're just going to pull that last stitch. I'll show you that when I get there. And then you'll also have when you finish a project, you might come to the end of something and it will say FO, and what that means, finish off. And so what you do is you tie off your end or fasten off your end, then you work your ends in however it is that you like to work them in. This particular afghan has no needs of working in the ends unless you run out of yarn somewhere in the middle and you have to connect 2 pieces together. Then you have to work in those ends of the 2 pieces that you connected. But the cool thing about this is that the ends become the fringe. Right in here, I don't know if you can see this, I'll try to zoom in, but right here it shows SC. That stands for single crochet. So whenever you see an SC in a pattern, that's what it means, single crochet. And so then from there you're going to have other stitches, which I cover and will cover in a following video, and that will be your double crochet, which is DC, and your treble crochet, which is TC. So just like it's going to sound. But you have to start off with the single crochet first, because once you get the single crochet down, then the other ones will be much easier to understand. So before I go on, I'm going to show you a few pictures of various things, such as the amigurumi I've talked about before. Amigurumi is a Japanese word. It's for any kind of stuffed character you're going to make. And whenever you're doing those, you need to actually start off with a magic circle, which I do have a separate video on. That's the best way to do it. But the whole rest of the thing is made all with single crochets. You're very rarely ever going to have anything more than a single crochet. Believe it or not, the single crochet, as simple as it is, even though it's the very next stitch that you learn, it is used a lot. So I have a green sweater I've shown in several of our videos. It's actually a jade, and that one's done mostly in single crochets, at least the body. And so I put a picture of it here. So the whole bodice of that particular sweater is done in the single crochet. Another thing done completely in single crochet would be this plarn, which is plastic yarn bag and little cell phone or whatnot pouch that I made to go with it. This is actually going to go in a local auction for the carrying place. And anyway, this is done completely, it's made completely out of recycled grocery bags that I cut into strips. I have a video just on how to make these that's also part of the Crochet 101 series that I'll put down below. But in the description box, don't forget to hit show more. But anyway, it's all done entirely in single crochets. No other stitch did I use in this but the single crochet. So, well, and the chain stitch to get started. But anyway, I didn't use doubles or triples, or trebles as they're commonly known, because I want a tight stitch on this. When you start working into the longer stitches, that's your double and treble crochets, it makes a looser stitch. That's nice for some things, but something like a tote, you want the stitch tight. Just like with a hat like this, you want it to be warm, so I've got a tight stitch. I've got single crochets here. So this zebra hat that I made, all in single crochets, the ears too. A couple other uses of single crochets. Now the hat itself is using lots of chains, lots of double and treble crochets, and some cluster stitches that I will go over in other videos. But this part here, the band of this hat, it's a beret style hat, is done in single crochets because it makes it tighter. It just makes a better band for, you know, holding on to the head. And then these leg warmers that I made, I also have a video on how to make these, were made with a combination of single crochets and double crochets, switching each row, single crochet, double crochet, single crochet, double crochet. However, you can easily make a set of leg warmers using only single crochets. Now, when I did the bands on each end, those I do all in single crochets because they just have better hold than doing like a double crochet or anything like that. So let's move on and start learning how to do this single crochet. So I'm going to do my slip knot. And now what I'm going to want is I want 10 single crochets across. I'm just coming up with a number. So whenever I do that, my chain that I'm going to work into is going to need to be 1 stitch longer than the amount of single crochets I want. So I'm going to do a total of 11 chains. And there's 11. Okay, that's really important. And the reason for that is that you can't work into this first chain. You need an extra chain in order to work into the next one over, so that once I work all the way across through all the other chains, skipping this first one that's here, then I will have 10 stitches. So you're looking at your chain, you want to make sure you keep it straight and don't allow it to twist. Work through the top loop of each chain all the way across. Okay, so there's my first one. Now let me slow down the next few so you can see how I do that. I take my hook. I should always have a loop on here at this point. Insert it into the chain right under that top loop. Grab the yarn and pull up a loop. Now there's 2 loops on the hook. Now I'm going to wrap the yarn and pull that wrap through the 2 loops. Okay, again, through under that top loop of the chain, grab the yarn and pull up a loop, wrap with my left hand, grab the yarn and pull back through the 2. And by the way, before I meant to say this in my last video and I forgot, Heather over at Going Batty, if you're left-handed, she has crochet videos for those of you who are left-handed. If that will make it easier, go check her channel out. I'll go ahead and put a link to her channel, in fact, in the description box down below. Actually, I'll go ahead and put a link to at least the first video in her little series that she's doing on the crocheting left-handed. Okay, so again, insert, grab the yarn and pull up a loop, wrap, pull through the 2 loops on the hook. So right now I have 4 single crochets into that chain. So I'm going to go ahead and finish out these last 6, making sure that my chain stitch down here, that's my foundation, is staying straight. Don't want to allow it to twist. So you just take your left hand and keep untwisting it every time it tries to twist. And again, notice how I'm anchoring the yarn here with my left hand, so it's coming from the yarn bowl into here, into my hand, and then up through my fingers like so. That's how I prefer to hold it. So okay, there's my last single crochet. Now, when you go to work back, there's 2 ways that you can do this. A lot of patterns, when you're doing just a whole bunch of rows of single crochet, most patterns will say single crochet in each chain or in each single crochet across, and then it will say chain 1, and that'll usually be the end of that row. Then it will tell you to turn, and then if you do that, if you have that chain 1, don't crochet into this first single crochet. Skip that one and crochet into the next single crochet. And the reason for that is that that chain 1 you do actually becomes your first single crochet. So then what you're doing is you only need to do 9 single crochets across, in this case, because we have 10 altogether. And that's one way to do it. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I do it, which is differently. It's just my own way I came up with. I don't know if anyone else does it. I find I prefer it. It prevents me from having the mistake of accidentally, if I'm just going along real fast and working on a scarf or something, forgetting not to crochet in that first single crochet. And if you do that, then what happens is each consecutive row is going to keep getting wider and wider. And so I like to, instead of adding that chain 1, I just turn like that, and I work directly into that first single crochet. I think part of the reason people do the chain 1, sometimes it depends on the look you want, but it also makes it feel a little less awkward. For some reason it feels a little awkward working into that first single crochet. So let me show that again. I just go, that one was a little loose anyway, so you want to make sure, especially in this case, that you pull some tension up on that yarn with that finger to keep from having too much looseness there, or too much slack, and then I do my single crochet. That could be another reason why a lot of people prefer to do the chain 1 and then skipping the first single crochet. Me, I don't like to do it that way. So then we just continue working into our single crochets. So going under the top 2 loops of the single crochet, because I didn't really show that in the last one. And if this was double crochet or triple crochet, it'd be the same thing. You'd be going right under the top 2 loops of that stitch, pulling up a loop, and then pulling through 2. Same way as you do with the chain, except for when you're actually working into a stitch that's not a chain stitch, you're going through 2 loops at a time most of the time. Okay? So let me go ahead and finish this out. Well, actually, let me do a couple more in slow motion. So inserting the hook under the top 2 loops, grab that loop, pull it up, wrap, pull through 2. I'll do one more slow, going through under those top 2 loops, pull up a loop, wrap, and pull through 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and, let's go ahead and finish this out. And now I'm going to show you a couple other things that you can do for just a difference in appearance. Now, I'm going to show you right here. I had to turn some of my lights off so it wouldn't be so bright, so I'm hoping you can see this. You'll see that there's kind of a ridge in between each double crochet row and single crochet row. So this is a single crochet and a double crochet, then you see a ridge, then another single crochet and a double crochet, and then a ridge. Okay, so let me show you on the zebra hat. I'm not sure how well these colors are going to show up because both black and white, they're really hard to see on camera, but I have a ridge here and here in between each row. Each one of these stripes is 2 rows of single crochets. So 2 black, 2 white, 2 black. So every time I would change the color to add more definition to the stripe, I would do this particular type of single crochet, and I'm going to show you that next. It's really simple. All you do, instead of going under both your loops like I was doing here, you're going to do what's called working through the back loop only. So I skip over the top of that front loop and go into the back loop and do the same kind of stitch. Okay, and again, through that back loop only, pull up the yarn and finish out the stitch through the back loop only, grab that yarn, pull up a loop, and stitch. Now, when you're used to going through the 2 loops, going through the back loop only will feel like it takes just a little bit longer, but you'll get used to it. It's just like anything else. You should be able to see a difference between the way these stitches look and the way this one looks, because it's got that little ridge there. Okay, now there's also, in case you're wondering, there's also a stitch that would be front loop only. So what's going to happen is it's going to make the ridge from the opposite side. So you're not going to see the ridge show up on this front side as you're working it. But when you turn the yarn, or when you turn the work later, which I'm going to go ahead and do now, then you'll see a little bit of a ridge showing up right there. Okay, I don't use that one very often. I'm usually doing a back loop only kind of stitch. I don't want these ridges for the next thing I'm going to show you. So I'm going to take those 2 rows out, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch colors. And so if I was going to finish this off, what I would do is I would do a chain. That's going to help lock it. I'm going to cut my yarn, and then I'm going to pull that end through. So now I'm going to turn the work, and I'm going to use this darker color here. So there's other types of single crochets that you can do when you're doing a lot of single crochets like this. So let me do a couple across, just normal single crochets. Then you can do a long single crochet, and depending on how many rows down here you have to work in is going to depend how long that's going to be. So if I'm doing a regular single crochet, I would work through this one here. A long single crochet could come down to the next row. I can make it even longer by going down to the row even farther down, and I can go clear down to the bottom to make yet another one. So I'm not actually working through the stitches at that time. I'm working around the stitches when I do that. And then I might reverse that in length. So I go up to the next row, then the next one, and then I come back to working actually through the single crochets. And so then what you end up with is this little pattern like this. And that's how you get a design like this. That's how this one works. So you see where it's got this kind of arrow pointing thing. That's what's actually happening right here with this. And in fact, I think this was where I first learned about that particular stitch, was when I made this Afghan many years ago. So that's your long single crochet. It will be written as LSC, but the amount of rows you go down is going to depend on the pattern. So I always make up my own when I'm doing stuff like this. Like I'll show you a picture here of a hat and gloves that I did using that particular type of stitching, so you can see the details there. The next stitch you're going to learn is going to be the half double crochet, then the double crochet, and then the treble crochet. And then there's even variances between all those, but with each one, the stitch gets taller and taller. For example, right here, in this hat, I've got a combination of treble and single and double. So this really long stitch here, the gap in between is made by using chains between each stitch. But this tall stitch right here is a treble crochet, and these cluster stitches are made with double crochets, so you can see the difference in height of those. And then of course the single crochets, as you can see here, are very short little rows. But the one thing about the working through a back loop only is it actually makes, which is another reason why I like to do, when I'm doing stripes, I like to have the ridge. Not only does it add more definition and interest because it adds more texture, it actually makes these rows just a tiny bit taller. So they're, otherwise if I worked the white right into this black instead of working into the back loop only, each stripe will actually look just a little skinnier. So by doing it that way, it makes the rows wider. But you have to also keep that in mind when you're doing something like a hat like this, that you're going to actually, when I design and make these hats, this is all my own design. I have a whole bunch of these animal hats that I've come up with and made. When I'm doing like the tiger hat or the zebra hat, I actually have to take a couple of rows off the total amount of rows of the hat. Otherwise, it ends up a little bit too long. So, but then again, some people may like a longer hat anyway. But what I suggest, if you're just starting out and you're new to this, then go ahead and just do some little practice squares like this and play around with some of these stitches and get familiar with how the single crochet works using the back loop only, the front loop only, and the long single crochet. So that when you come across this in patterns, you'll be very familiar with it and it will be very easy to do. I forgot to say in my last video, there was a book that I got when I first started out that I think it was Learn to Crochet in a Day or something like that. I don't have it anymore because I gave it to my sister years ago because I don't need it anymore. But I will go ahead and link to that book. If I can find it on Amazon, I'll go ahead and link to that below because it's a really great book to start out with because it also teaches you about reading patterns and it also gives you a couple of patterns. There is an Afghan I made, which I'll show a picture of right here. It was the very first Afghan I made and I made it from that particular book. Okay, we'll be watching for my next video coming out soon. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.